Hi guys, welcome back. 4th of July is right around the corner. You're going to be dealing with family and food and maybe even a couple negative comments. So today's YouTuber that we're going to be visiting with is Carmen O Quinn. I hope you enjoy.
Out negative people while losing weight, holiday edition. We are coming into the holiday season, and you're probably watching this video because you are trying to lose weight. And whether you're thinking about losing weight, you're like mid weight loss journey, whatever it is. But there are when it comes to losing weight, not everybody is encouraging, is the truth. And we are about to be around family. Some family you like, some family you love, some family you're like, doggone it, how did I get stuck with you? And so, there's always, normally, unless you're just completely blessed and you have like the positive family, from wherever, the land of milk and honey, and you have nobody negative, then that's a blessing. That's a blessing. But most of us don't. And most of us, when we're going to be around friends and family and we're losing weight and we're going to be making different decisions when it comes to eating this holiday season, because we know that to get a change, you have to make a change. And the way we've been eating has typically led us to where we're at. And so 6.5 years ago, when I finally made a different decision, that I was sick of being morbidly obese, I was sick of being 288 pounds, I was sick of being stuck where I was shopping in the plus size section, then it was like, okay, something's got to change. And that included how I approached the holidays when it came to food. So let's go ahead and talk about how to still enjoy your holidays without, and how to deal with those negative people. Because here's the bottom line. You cannot control other people. You can only control yourself. That is it. So at some point, we're going to run into contact with them. And I can remember going through the holiday season, and I was pretty blessed. I didn't have a lot of them, but I did have a few of them. I think the best way to do this is just to give you some examples of what you might run into, and then how I have found is the best way to deal with it without getting, in a heated argument match, me being defensive, defending myself, or caving, which is actually what I would do the most of the time. So your biggest thing that people are going to say is, they're going to give you a hard time about not eating the junk, or about drinking water and not drinking alcohol. The biggest thing you're going to run into is people saying, oh, what are you're on a diet? Don't you know it's Thanksgiving? What, you can't have any pie? And what we typically want to do is put up our dukes and start defending our position of, well, yeah, I know it's good, but I'm really trying to lose weight and I'm trying to diet, and gosh, I'm doing really well and I don't want to gain a bunch of weight. Big X across the screen. Do not get into a defending match with anybody about your choices. At the end of the day, if somebody has an opinion about what you and I are putting into our mouths, that's their deal. That's not my deal. That's their issue. That's their deal. And so if somebody says to me, Carmen, you're not going to have any of that cake, or what, you're on this diet, you can't have any alcohol. No, I can have alcohol. I just, right now I'm good.
I love that answer, right? No, I'm good right now. Maybe in a minute, maybe a little later, right? You don't necessarily need to say, I'm on the wagon or whatever, right? But that's another thing I always tell people. When you go on a diet, you don't necessarily have to tell the world that you're on a diet, because if you do, and then 3 or 4 days later you quit, you look kind of foolish, like somebody that should have just had that piece of pie at Thanksgiving, right? But at the same time, if you're not on a diet and or if you are on a diet, but you don't let the world know you are, then usually you can go to family outings. And like I said, at 4th of July, you can have just a hot dog rather than a hot dog and a hamburger. And more than likely, no one will even notice.
Even if I know I'm not going to have any later, I guess we'll see how I feel. I'm not going to engage with them in their issue. I'm not even going to do it. I don't need to do it. I don't need to get them over to my side. Listen, I've tried all the ways. I'm a pretty confrontational kind of girl. Like, I don't run away from confrontation. I'm like, oh, what you want to question what I'm doing? Well, let me just talk about what you're doing. And so, like, I have no issues with confrontation. However, that doesn't really help any holiday go great. And so I've learned through experience, and it doesn't make me feel great. And at the end of the day, it can cause me to cave and give in to what they want me to do. And so at the end of the day, I just found it's easier to not engage. Oh gosh, you look at all those vegetables. You're gonna be pooping like crazy tomorrow.
Okay, I wasn't expecting her to go there. But the reality is, what she said there is true, guys. When you go to the family outing, don't start an argument with your brother. Don't get into it with your brother-in-law, right? Don't start getting into these little debates and stuff that end up becoming political arguments. Just go with the flow, because I don't know about you guys, but when you're at a family outing and then all of a sudden somebody's drinking too much and getting loud and out of hand, it's really off-putting. Try to be the go with the flow person, at least on the holidays. Can we agree on that?
Okay, you're probably right. Goodness sakes. Oh well, at least I won't be constipated, right? Just blow it off. If someone has an opinion about what you're doing, it is their opinion. And frankly, it's none of your business. It's none of my business. And it's not my job or your job to defend your position. Whenever you're in a place where you feel like you have to start defending your weight loss choices, unless it's something unhealthy, unless you're just like not eating, or you're eating 500 calories every day, or you're doing things that are just completely unhealthy, like starving yourself, that's different. Like if you're doing something unhealthy, then yes, someone can have an opinion. But if you're just eating according to your goals and you're not eating all the crap, you're having some of it, or you're choosing not to eat dessert, or you're choosing, maybe you're choosing to do a workout on the holiday, and people are like, oh, you gotta work out, like you can't take a day off, it's Thanksgiving. Yeah, I totally could, but you know what? I get to have chocolate cake later. Or you don't have to defend that. Or, I could. I actually am looking forward to it. And leave it at that.
Whether you're visiting family at their house for the holidays or you're at your own, in that scenario, there's nothing stopping you from just waking up, not telling a single soul, opening your front door, and going on a walk. Problem solved. Jesse, you solved another one. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Don't engage. As somebody who used to engage with all of it, listen, this is a real thing. And food bullying is a real thing. Weight loss bullying, bullying in general. And there were times where even my husband, who, bless his heart, bless his soul, he's a foodie. And there's even times now where he's like, oh, what? You're not going to have blah, blah, blah. And my husband was always the person I had the hardest time with, because he never meant anything by it. He would just be playful about it because he was having something. And I would defend myself, or I would give in and I would be like, okay, fine, I'll have Chinese, or I'll have a burger, or fine, I'll have some cookies, fine, I'll have popcorn. Where now I'm just like, no, babe, I'm good. And now I'll be like, stop food bullying me. And he's like, oh my goodness, I'm not bullying you. I'm like, yes, you are. Stop it. And so, because I've learned that that's an issue. I've learned that people will food bully. People food bully you more when you're trying to make good choices than when you're making bad choices. Believe it or not, I've been food bullied more as a small person as I ever was as a big person. Like when I was morbidly obese and I was shoveling too much food into my mouth, no one was ever like, hey, fluffsters. You might want to you probably shouldn't get a second piece of pecan pie.
So anyway, I want you guys to go to Carmen O Quinn's YouTube channel. I'll link it in our description down below. And I want you to subscribe to her. She seems like a ball of energy, and she also does a lot of other videos that I think you guys would really enjoy. One other thing I noticed is that whenever we have somebody on that's kind of overweight currently, they seem to be kind of slower even with the way they talk. But I noticed that with the skinny folks that we have on, they seem to be naturally quicker and faster, even with the way they talk. Did you guys notice that as well? Or do you guys notice that in general? Or is it just me? One of the things that I want you guys to think about, again, with 4th of July right around the corner, after the 4th of July, we're eventually going to have Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. And in between now and then, you might have dinners and anniversaries, right? So you're going to be food bullied like she's describing about once a month, about a dozen times a year. So what you want to do is when you're on your walk, dive into your think tank and just come up with a plan on how you can best handle these type of situations. If you know how you're going to handle it in advance, you might have no problems at all. And with that being said, why don't you go get your shoes? Let's go for a walk. Good morning, venters. It rained last night or early this morning, apparently. A lot of times in Arizona, it'll rain during the hours in which everyone's asleep. So sometimes you get this phantom rain type situation where it obviously rained, but you never knew or noticed it. One of the things that I've noticed, and you might be the same way, and if you are, let me know down in the comments, but one of the things I noticed about 15, 20 years ago is that every single day that it rains, whether my mind knows it or not, I end up sleeping like a baby. I don't know what it is, but I'll even sleep a little bit longer than normal when it rains. So it's kind of weird. I don't know why, but I enjoy it very much. I wish it rained a little bit more often here in Arizona. Right now, this morning, it feels like I went in a time machine back about, I don't know, probably to the beginning of when I first started walking with you guys, because, God, it feels like about 80 degrees, very pleasant. And while there is moisture in the air and there's humidity, it doesn't feel super duper high. It feels kind of low. Now, tomorrow, trust me, it'll be super hot, plus the humidity in there. But again, the summer is the time when it rains the most in Arizona, which is so counterintuitive to what you would think, because you would think, okay, it's the hottest time of year, it's really dry in Arizona, they probably don't get any rain, but when those monsoons hit, we get rain during this time of year. It's during the winter where you would think it would rain a little bit more that it doesn't really rain too much. And then every time it rains in the winter, you're like, how come we don't get snow? But for whatever reason in Phoenix, we only get snow about once a decade. I've seen a little bit of snow here in Phoenix like 2 or 3 times, but it looks like dew that just kind of froze over on the grass, right? So you come out and it looks like the grass has a little bit of white stuff on it. And they say, hey, it snowed a tiny bit. But, nothing like you guys experience around the rest of the country. Now, I have experienced snow when, you go up to Snowbowl, Flagstaff, Prescott, and you go sledding and stuff. And I told you guys a couple months back that one time my ex-wife, she was really, really overweight. Oh, I got some noise here. Let me walk by this. One time when my wife was excessively overweight, we went up to Flagstaff and we started snowboarding. And not snowboarding, excuse me, sledding. And she hit a bump and everybody was in silence as we looked at her, and she got about this high off the ground, right? Stomach first, this high off the ground. And she ended up hitting, and the wind went out of her. It was like oh. And I remember everybody around was like, oh. It was like straight out of a movie. And I thought she was dead. A lot of people thought, like, God, she must have to go to the hospital or something. But she bounced up. She literally bounced up, and she was able to continue on with her day. But yeah, that sledding strikes me as something very dangerous. I wonder how many people have sledding accidents that lead to their demise every year, you know? Hey guys, look, there's another house for sale. I might have showed that house to you guys before, but you know, whenever you have a house that looks kind of iffy and all of a sudden it looks nice, I always expect there to be a sale sign up there. A lot of times the realtors, out here at least, I don't know how they are around the rest of the country, but when they're getting ready to sell your house, they'll actually snazz it up for you. So a lot of times these houses that are the ugliest ones in the neighborhood, they go for sale, and before you know it, they're kind of the most beautiful house in the neighborhood. And again, I thank the realtors for that. Realtors don't like selling houses that look unkept. And when you can, you know, mow somebody's yard, trim the bushes and stuff, and, you know, maybe get rid of some exterior filth, all of a sudden, you make the neighborhood look nicer, you know? And I feel bad for the people that are moving, because I don't think everybody's moving with the intention of upgrading their lives. I think a lot of times these people move into a neighborhood, whether they're renting or buying or what have you, and I think they honestly think they can afford the neighborhood. And then, you know, what happens is sometimes you lose a job, sometimes you get divorced or separated, sometimes you might have a situation where it's you and a roommate buying something or renting something, and you end up realizing you don't want to be a roommate with that person, or vice versa, and before you know it, you're moving, and life goes on. You know, we live in a world where half of the marriages end in divorce, probably a little bit more than half. So every time you're looking at a family, there's a chance they could be a time bomb just ready to explode and end things, you know? But again, hopefully the people that are moving in a good, you know, moving on up sort of way, and not moving on down, because I'm telling you, I don't think I would want to go forward in this world with bad credit and stuff where it'll hinder you from being able to, you know, move on. Right now, everything is so expensive. I can't imagine moving out of one place for another place that's going to be extremely cheaper. You know, the only way you can really get a place that's somewhat inexpensive is if you're willing to go to a part of town that's a little suspect. And what a shitty thing that you have to contemplate, especially if you're a single parent household, right? If you're a single mom or a single dad, I mean, I don't know about you, but I hate the idea of having to move to a neighborhood that's not as nice simply to afford it, because everything is so sky high. And what's scary about Arizona, and I could be wrong on this one, but I feel like we used to be amongst the most livable and affordable states. But again, the last couple of decades, because California is such a nightmare place for businesses and people that are trying to raise a family, you got all these Californians, and they escape the misery that's California for Arizona, and all of a sudden you can't afford nothing, and all of a sudden you start getting these politicians that are just weird, and it feels like California Junior here, where everything's expensive and looks like hell. You know, it's crazy. By the way, speaking of crazy, 73% of the American foods that we can purchase at the grocery store are considered ultra processed. Guys, according to the YouTube video that I watched earlier today, scientists actually want to start labeling these foods with ads on them, or little, you know, messages on them stating that they're linked to cancers and that they're very unhealthy. And with 73% of our foods being highly ultra processed, that's the reason that a lot of our guts are addicted to these foods. I watched another little ad. This one was on the Good News Network, and it says that scientists have located what is in our gut biome that makes us addicted to these foods, and they've also located a bacteria in our same gut biome that when it's multiplied or increased can actually help us break the addiction to these foods. So I wanted to read about the article a little bit more, but I might be sharing that with you tomorrow or in the near future. But the point of what I'm saying now, based on the other video that I watched, is that it looks like 73% of American foods are ultra processed. And it's these ultra processed foods that are akin to like smoking cigarettes. Like they're really not good for you. And I think that that's interesting. She had brought up, the scientist that they had on the video had brought up the fact that a lot of times these microwaved foods like lasagna and pastas and stuff, those are the big culprits. And it reminded me of my Michelina addiction I had through a great portion of my life. I can't tell you how many times when I was a bachelor growing up, living in my own apartments and stuff, and sometimes even when you have a girlfriend, they're not necessarily into cooking or anything, right? So we always constantly had a freezer that was full with microwavable pastas and lasagnas, these Michelina type microwave meals. I have a feeling a lot of you guys have been eating Michelina meals for a good portion of your life too. And a lot of times those foods are inexpensive, which should kind of give a red flag. Hey, how am I able to eat a lunch for $1.59? The reason you are is because it's filled with chemicals and goop, that make you feel more hungry than full, And no wonder it's leading you to eat a second and third meal, which is the Michelina downfall that I kind of finally figured out and have stayed away from a little bit, especially over the last 100 days or so. When you eat one of those 99-cent Michelina meals, which, by the way, with inflation, let's be honest, they're, I think, $1.59 now. They're no longer 99 cents. But when you eat these meals, they actually make you crave a second and third meal. So even though the one meal is probably a decent-sized portion, it gets in your stomach, and before you know it, it makes you hungry for a second and third one. So yeah, there's a lot of gaming of the system that goes into our food. And maybe I've been a little naive to how much food has become progressively more and more addictive through the years. But you want to know something? I mean, it's not like the word addiction was stricken from our vocabulary, right? Even though nobody ever technically said that sugar was addictive or that food was addictive, I think we all know, ever since Richard Simmons started dancing, swinging to the oldies, right? Or sweating to the oldies back in the day, I think we've all known that people have addictions to food, whether people tell us that there's an addictive quality to it or not. I mean, it's just obvious. If something tastes sweet, you're gonna enjoy it. If something has a Dorito-like crunch, you're probably gonna enjoy it. That's the one thing I find fascinating. Do you like the potato chip because of the salty, sourness of it? Or do you like the potato chip because of the crunchy aspect? There's a satisfying feeling that we get when something crunches like that, So I think those things are super interesting, but could you imagine? Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments. Could you imagine if this time next year or this time 2 or 3 years from now, imagine if every time you bought a Michelina's frozen meal, imagine if it came with that same exact warning that a carton of cigarettes does, right? This product might cause, more damage than it does good. There might be cancer properties in this food. This food's been known to be addictive to lab rats. And by the way, a lot of times they're able to find out stuff about things being addictive to us based on the reactions that lab mice have. Apparently lab mice and humans, share a lot of these addictive receptors in their gut. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. A lot of times we don't want harm to happen to animals, but you know what? Sometimes you have to sacrifice a couple of animals like mice and what have you to test and find out certain things about food products and stuff. It's a necessary evil. You know, a lot of times you'll see companies sell shampoos and stuff. And if you turn the bottle around, it'll say, hey, this product has not been tested on laboratory animals. And I don't know, one half of me says, that's great. You know, I don't want them washing every rabbit and every bunny with these chemicals just to see if they're safe. But at the same time, I'd rather have them tested on animals than humans. You know, if they're not tested on animals, while on the outside that sounds like a great idea, like, oh my God, these, you know, this company is really, you know, fast forward when it comes to progressive properties or qualities when it comes to animals. You know, they don't want these products tested on animals. Yeah, but at the same time, there's a cruelty to that, because it means what you're doing is you're going to test those products out on humans. I think we should have the ability to test those products on animals. Now, I'm sure there's people that disagree with me out there, but we live in a chemical world. If you have all these chemicals and you're trying them on humans first, you know, that seems like the scary thing. Because what if you ever did have a shampoo that literally started causing people to die, or, you know, having these horrible side effects? That's where you would actually go before Congress, right? The companies would go before Congress, their CEOs, and Congress would ask them, you didn't think with these new chemicals, these experimental chemicals, you didn't think it would be smart to try them out on lab mice and lab bunnies and different, you know, animals first to ensure their efficacy and safety? So again, it seems great, right? You read a bottle and it says hasn't been tested on, you know, lab animals. But at the same time, what if it ends up giving you a horrible rash or a horrible reaction, or you end up getting sick because of it? I think there does come a time when it might be safe or safer to use those animals. But either way, different subject. So on another note, and I'm sorry if you disagree with me about the animals and, you know, the lab conditions, but put that in the comments. There's no reason why we can't disagree sometimes. My thinking is, if you're not going to have a product that's tested on animals, I just don't think you can test it on humans. My thinking is just don't bring it to the market. So if we disagree, I still don't want those chemicals and stuff coming to the market if they're not going to be tested on somebody else before they're tested on us. And by somebody else, I mean the animals. So on another note, guys, we have day 17 here. This is that zone where if you've been walking with me reluctantly for the past couple weeks, I want you to ask yourself a question. Now that I've been walking a couple weeks, do you think this is something that you dislike as much as you did the first day? Or do you kind of feel like, hey, this walking thing is my jam. Jesse was right. This walking thing is where it's at. I get to think straight. I get to come up with solutions to my problems. I get to walk instead of drinking that morning coffee. You know, guys, if there's a piece of you that really likes the idea of quitting your coffee addiction, God, this walk might be right up your alley, because what will happen is you'll slowly realize that, yeah, when I start my walk, I'm still half asleep. But 5, 10, 15 minutes later, I'm alive and revived and ready to go. And when you're ready to go and stuff, you might be able to skip that coffee. You know, I've never been a coffee drinker, but I would imagine there's a percentage of you watching that probably spend, what, a good $5 to $10 a day at Starbucks. And 5 is probably impossible. You probably spend closer to 10 or 15 a day. Guys, if you could get rid of that $10 a day addiction, that's going to save you hundreds of bucks a month. And before you know it, there's your $100 a month that you can start putting into your savings or into your retirement. You know, you could really change your life by taking these walks. You can really change your life by eliminating sugar. But a lot of times these changes go well beyond just your physical makeup. If you lose weight, great, but what if you can also save money and then invest that money and ultimately get to the point where walking can change your life in every way, shape, or form? So again, if you're at day 15, 16, or 17, and you absolutely still hate walking, but you wanted to give me those 15 to 21 days, well, still try to give me the 21. And if you can walk after that, great. But if you decide that, hey, walking's not for me, I'm not going to do this anymore, well, I can't force you to walk. But what I can tell you is that it doesn't get easier than walking, you know? There's no exercises out there that are ultimately going to be something that you can do every single day that aren't going to be more challenging than walking is. And again, remember, whether you officially take walks or not, you're still walking somewhat every day. So my thinking is, unless you want to be one of those people that loses their ability to walk, start walking now. You know, the people as they get older, they naturally shrink. So when we hear these videos and these doctors like Dr. Terry Mann, I've got Dr. Terry Mann on my mind because I'm sorry, there's just something really defeated and really weird about the science that they're working with. And again, if this is the first time you've watched, Terry Mann is the one that basically said, hey, based on everything I've seen, dieting and exercise is worthless. You're going to end up gaining the weight back. But my thinking is, that's wrong. Because number one, have you noticed that as people age, they end up losing that muscle and they end up losing weight? I don't see too many people that were as big as they are in their 30s and 40s when they're in their 60s and 70s. So elderly people naturally shrink. Elderly people naturally eat less than they do when they're younger. So I just don't really know how the scientists compiled this data. But again, I bet if you followed the money behind those scientific studies, I bet you'd find that some of them are probably funded by these companies that are creating these medications. That's what's so weird. Why do people do studies? Where do they get the money from? Is this just research done at the university level and the money's just there because the university takes in tuition every single year? Or were these studies funded by Big Pharma? You know, all through my life, people were always describing Big Pharma as this dark cloud, as this grim reaper type entity that all they cared about was making money and keeping people sick. Well, it's weird because half the time we talk about Big Pharma in a negative way, but then every time they come out with this study, and by the way, studies are weird because again, you could have somebody that has a different agenda and they could pay for a different study that comes out the exact opposite of this one, you know? So again, it's just weird. And then think about this. This is one of those things that's always tripped me out, and I'm pretty sure it trips out everybody else too. Guys, every 2 or 3 years over the last 30 years that I can remember, one year they'll come out and they'll tell us caffeine and coffee is excellent for you. And then the very next year they'll come out and say, okay, well maybe caffeine and coffee isn't excellent for you. And then 2 years later, it'll flip back to the previous study. So again, I don't want to grow up in a world where we don't trust science and don't trust the experts, but I think we all need to start realizing that every darn scientific study is funded by somebody. And it's usually funded by people with an agenda, and it's usually backed by, you know, it's backed by, God, how can I say this? It's backed by profits. When you're selling stuff that's publicly traded, you owe it to your dividend holders, right? To provide them with their annual dividend. You owe them the idea that their stock is going to go up in value. And when you have this medication that everyone's predicting is going to be bigger than Viagra, and it's going to be bigger than insulin, and it's going to be bigger than all the other medications combined profit-wise, I mean, if that doesn't make red flags pop up all over the place, I don't know what does. And one thing that I hate to admit, but it's really true, over the last 4, 5, 6 years, we as a nation, as a world actually, have become a far more skeptical of what we consider to be the experts and the scientists. Like, for example, with the last thing we went through the last couple years, do you guys find it amazing that everybody was on one side of the aisle, and now all of a sudden we have all these people that say, oh no, I was always on the other side of the aisle. I don't know if you were, and if you were, you definitely weren't loud and proud about it. There was a lot of people that were trying to warn us about these things, but they were silenced. And a lot of these people that have a microphone and talk about it daily now, they had the microphone back then, but they never used the microphone until recently, you know? So again, if you look at now, doesn't it seem like every doctor says, oh, I was warning people about these vaccines and about this, that, and the other. I was warning people about this ever since this happened. And I don't believe half of them, because I remember it was like radio silence. And by the way, I was one of these guys that was all for these. The other day we were walking and my phone began to ring, and I pushed the button on the side to, ignore the call. And the only reason I did that is because 99% of my calls are these darn salesmen and telemarketers from India. And it drives me crazy, because sometimes you have a call that comes in that you'd actually need to answer, and you're so used to these darn telemarketing calls flooding your phone. So the other day we were walking, and I actually got a phone call that was somewhat important that I needed to take. And again, I ended up ignoring that call, not because I didn't want to take this phone call, but because of these telemarketers. And people say, well, Jesse, why don't you block your call and this, that, and the other? It's getting to the point where I don't want to purchase anything online anymore, because every single time you purchase anything online, you end up getting all these phone calls again. So what'll happen is companies will offer you a discount if you become part of their text or their mail list. So you hit, send me your offers whenever, you have a sale or something, right? And they end up rewarding you by selling your phone number and information to 1 million different telemarketing companies. And what's really shitty about that is your phone number is worth like a nickel. So these companies that you end up buying their products, they sell you out for a nickel or a dime for your phone number and information. So it's just like, you know what? I think I'm going to just be done with buying stuff off online, and maybe I'll just start predominantly buying stuff in person. If you guys have this same irritation, let me know. And if you guys have ways around it, let me know. I've tried blocking the call. I've tried answering the call, but keeping my phone on mute to trick the system into thinking that they have a bad phone number. I've tried answering and telling these scammers I'm not even retired, I'm not on Social Security, and it's like they hang up and then they immediately call you the next day anyway. So you're darned if you do, darned if you don't. So those are the things that frustrate me, not because I care, it's easy for me to hang up on them, right? But they just don't stop, and one call ends up becoming 30 every day. And again, there's these companies out there that spoof phone numbers. So you can go through their website and you can get all these fake numbers assigned to you. I don't know why our senators and our congressmen don't shut down those spoofing companies. All they do is set up telemarketing companies that scam our seniors into identity theft. Anyway, that was my little vent for today. Stay positive. Don't listen to the experts. You are capable of losing weight. You just need to put it into a lifestyle, and that's why I'm trying to urge the world to walk with us every day. So have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.